Explorer, are you ready? It's time for a brand new search through the solar system in the Fun Kids Science Weekly. My name is Dan. This is the smartest podcast in the entire universe. Not one science secret goes undiscovered around here. This week, now, do you reckon all dinosaurs were scaly? That's what we see in the movies, right? Well, think again, because we know that some had feathers.
Dinosaurs with feathers have actually been found for a very long time. The first dinosaur that we know of with feathers that was described was actually Archaeopteryx, and that was described in 1861.
Also, we're diving down through the ocean a lot this week, learning about one of the most painful stings in the world, and we'll travel down to reveal the incredible power of the seas.
So it's true, we know very little. We used to say that we know more about the surface of the moon or of Mars than about the seafloor.
It's all on the way in a brand new Fun Kids Science Weekly. Let's start with your science in the news. And we found a new flying reptile. Scientists have discovered this pterosaur, which soared above the dinosaurs more than 200 million years ago. The jawbone of the creature was discovered in the USA around 14 years ago. And now, new scanning technology has revealed details that show it's a brand new species, one we've never heard of before. Now, it's tough to find these creatures underground. Pterosaur bones are small and thin, so they often get destroyed before their fossils. Experts have named it Otephratdactylus macinterae, which means ash-winged dawn goddess. They thought it had big wings, and it was discovered in volcano ash, fossilised. How amazing is it that millions of years later, 200 million years later, we can find this bone underground, and then we can invent technology to discover what it was. Also, a massive volcano in Indonesia has been erupting again. Mount Lewatobi Laki has been erupting for the last week. It shot an ash cloud 11 miles into the sky along with a thunderous roar. It's on the island of Flores in Asia, and it was seen spewing lava earlier on too. Now, local towns have been evacuated because this is dangerous. Ash and lava can destroy homes, and ash in the sky affects where airplanes can fly. So we hear about volcanoes erupting and we imagine the phenomenal sight. But just think about what it means to those who live nearby, the devastation that it might cause. And when we talk about these kind of stories, it's really important to keep that in your brain. And our final story this week, over 10 years ago, a disease arrived in Britain which caused immense damage to trees across the country. But now, the ash trees are fighting back. Let's find out why with Professor Richard Buggs from the Royal Botanic Gardens, Kew. Richard, thank you for being there. So just take us back 10 or so years. What was it about this disease that ravaged ash trees all around the country?
In 2012, it was discovered that this new fungal disease was killing ash trees in Norfolk. And when scientists started to look elsewhere, they discovered that actually it had spread quite far already. It's a disease called ash dieback. We were kind of expecting that it would come into Britain, but it was still a shock when it arrived. And David Cameron was the Prime Minister at the time, and he actually called a COBRA committee meeting. That's a committee that gets gathered together when there's a national emergency. And they immediately stopped the movement of ash trees around the country and in and out of the country. But basically, it was too late, and the disease was here, and it was just impossible to get rid of it. And so at that point, we realised we had to work out the way ahead, given that we had this disease here killing our ash trees.
Now, it's a bit unusual for us to think of a fungus, a disease, actually killing a plant. How does something like that work? What is it doing to take down these enormous trees?
Well, it's producing tiny little mushrooms that are growing out of the dead leaves on the floor in the wood. And these tiny little mushrooms are releasing spores that are invisible to the naked eye. and the spores are rising up on air currents until they hit the leaf of an ash tree. When they land on the leaf of an ash tree, they then germinate. They have a little thing coming out of them, a bit like a root out of a seed, but it's called a fungal hyphae. And that goes down into the leaf of the ash tree, and it starts to attack the leaf. And the fungus tries to get from the leaf down into the wood of the tree. And if it can do that, it then causes these classic symptoms that are called ash dieback, where the tops of the tree start to die off because the fungus is getting into the wood and it's blocking up the vessels so that water and nutrients can't get to the ends of the twigs, and so they die. And if this keeps on happening, the fungus goes right down into the trunk of the tree, and eventually the tree is killed.
So this started happening on a huge scale back in 2012 with ash dieback. And in the last 13 years, we've discovered that the ash woodlands, they are naturally evolving greater resistance to this infection. So they're kind of doing it by themselves. How did you make this discovery that this was happening?
Well, first of all, we noticed that some trees were surviving much better than others under pressure from ash dieback. So in the same woodland, you would see some trees that were staying quite healthy and some were dying. And an organisation called Forest Research planted out some big trials of ash trees. What that means is they took a whole lot of young ash trees that were the same age and they planted them in a field with even spacing so that every tree had basically the same conditions. And then over the years, they watched as some of those trees died and some survived. And what we were able to do was use those trials to look at the DNA of the ash trees. We sequenced the DNA of hundreds of ash trees and compared the DNA of the healthy trees with the DNA of the unhealthy trees. And that meant we could find places in the DNA of ash trees that are related to being more healthy under ash dieback pressure. And what we then did was we went out into a natural woodland and we compared the DNA of adult trees that are over 40 years old, that established before ash dieback came into the country. We compared their DNA with the DNA of the younger trees that had been growing for less than 5 years. We were able to calculate that those younger trees are more resistant to ash dieback than the parent trees, and more resistant than we would expect them to be if they were just a random set of offspring from those adult trees.
They've naturally developed a greater resistance. How surprised are you that this has happened in such a short amount of time? It's something evolving this in 13 years. I mean, it's pretty extraordinary.
Well, it's very exciting. And the reason that it comes about is because the fungus is in the wood and it's producing spores in the leaf litter down where these young plants are growing up. They get a really heavy dose of the spores when they're really young. And only the ones that have a combination of genes, of DNA, from their parents that allow them to survive better, only those ones are surviving and growing. And so that causes the younger generation that survive to be those that are more resistant to ash dieback.
Well, it's been amazing to chat to you and learn all about this, Professor Richard Buggs. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much to Richard Buggs for coming on the show. Loads more experts sorting things out for us on the way for you. Let's do some questions, shall we? If you have anything sciencey that you want answered on the podcast, make sure you leave it as a voice note for me on the free Fun Kids app. You can do it at funkidslive.com. I absolutely love digging through them, and we sort it out in our midweek episode 2 that you get for free wherever you get your podcasts. First up this week, a message from Etta, who wants to know, what would happen if you were stung by 100 bees? Well, all those bees can't be good, and it's not normally good. 100 of them, it can cause toxic overload. So each bee injects about 100 micrograms of venom. So 100 bees, that would be 10,000 micrograms of venom. This amount causes severe pain, nausea, headaches, dizziness. And then your muscles can break down, your organs can fail, and it could result in death. Now, for an adult, experts think you can't really handle more than 1,500 stings. But 100 is still way too many, especially if you're allergic to bee stings, as many people are. You can have a really severe shock after just one. Your body goes into overdrive to react. It thinks that something's trying to harm you, and it kind of is with the venom. So it does so much to try and help you better, but in turn that makes you worse. You can have difficulty breathing, your tongue, your throat can swell up. And that's with one sting. With 100, well, that risk skyrockets, Etta. So thank you for the question. Not too clever, I think, 100 bees stinging you. It's always great to hear from you, Etta. Thank you for that. Let's get another one on. This is a voice note from Jessica. What do you have?
Hi, my name's Jessica and I'm 11 years old. I would like to know how scientists know that dinosaurs had feathers. Thank you. Bye.
Well, Jessica, thank you so much for your question. How do scientists know that dinosaurs had feathers? And I do a lot of digging about dinosaurs on the internet, normally not in the ground. And I feel like I'm always hearing about a brand new dinosaur, and we are certain that they have feathers. Shall we find out how we know that? Well, Dr. Emma Nicholls is going to sort it out for us from Oxford University Museum of Natural History. Emma, thank you for joining us. So how do we know that some dinosaurs had feathers?
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. So we actually have a lot of information about dinosaurs and feathers. And in fact, even though it feels as though this might be a fairly recent revelation, funnily enough, dinosaurs with feathers have actually been found for a very long time. The first dinosaur that we know of with feathers that was described was actually Archaeopteryx, and that was described in 1861. But despite having a really beautiful fossil of this animal that was very clearly partly dinosaur and partly what we would think of as bird at the time, now, of course, we know that birds are dinosaurs. The idea that birds stemmed from dinosaurs or were in fact dinosaurs themselves, which as we now know they are, it was not widely accepted at all. So Archaeopteryx was a really interesting fossil because it showed really dinosaurian characters. So it had teeth and it had a tailbone and it had particularly dinosaur claws, whereas it also had feathers and it had a wishbone, which is a bone that we associate with modern birds. So it really was a crossover between the two groups and the first and biggest clue that dinosaurs, in fact, had feathers.
When we see new dinosaurs being found, normally it's just a big bundle of bones in the earth. What's giving us clues that they might have had feathers? Perhaps sometimes there are fossils where you can see the feathered remains?
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, that's a really wonderful way of describing it, a big bundle of bones. So I quite often say that paleontology is like trying to do a jigsaw puzzle where there are 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle, but you've only got about 20% of the pieces and you don't know what the picture on the front of the box looks like. So it's really hard, and you're trying to put together these dinosaurs based on essentially an incomplete bundle of bones, as you put it. And so we know that some dinosaurs had feathers for two reasons. One is that we have literally found fossils of dinosaurs with feathers preserved. And the best place to find those is in China, where there are a lot of species of feathered dinosaur. One of my favorite words to say in paleontology is Sinosauropteryx, which is a dino bird from China that was actually ginger and white striped, which we can come back to if you like. But the other reason that we know a lot of dinosaurs had feathers is it's a difficult, weird term, which I will explain, but it's called phylogenetic bracketing. So essentially what that means is if dinosaur A had feathers, and we know that it did because we found a fossil with feathers, and dinosaur C had feathers because we found those in the fossil record. Dinosaur B in the middle that has evolved from A and it's the descendant of dinosaur A, but it's the ancestor, the one that came before dinosaur C. Even if we haven't found feathers for that one, because it came from an animal with feathers and it evolved into an animal with feathers, it's highly probable that it had feathers as well. And that's phylogenetic bracketing. So it's the assumption that an animal has a certain character because of the animals it's most closely related to also share those characters.
Well, I tell you what, Dr. Emma Nicholls, thank you for an entire dictionary's worth of long words that you brought into the chat. So I thank you, and thank you for sorting out Jessica's question. Dr. Emma Nicholls, thanks for being on.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
I had no clue that we think T-Rex had feathers. When you imagine a Tyrannosaurus, it's like the most devastatingly deadly thing your brain can picture. Does it seem friendlier with feathers? Nah, I'm not too sure. Stampy feet, sharp teeth. Maybe still make it quite deadly, I reckon. If you've got a question that you'd love sorted, make sure you leave it as a voice note for me on the free Fun Kids app and at funkidslive.com. Now our summer of science has started. How would you like to help me explore the universe? I am bringing this podcast on tour. Fun Kids Science Weekly Live is touring all around the UK. We've got a list of the shows, the dates and places I'm playing at funkidslive.com/tour. If you come along, it's me with dangerous beasts. We did a show in Sheffield the other week and I held a snake for the second time. I was once on holiday and a ranger put a snake around my neck at a zoo. And as soon as it was there, it started to twist and wrap itself around me. I thought this was all fun and games until the ranger very quickly took it off me. Maybe snakes are like a dog and they can kind of sense when you're a bit uneasy. The snake that I held up in Sheffield was perfectly harmless. It hissed and licked at me a few times. It just felt like a big coiled spring of muscle writhing around. We'll have some of those on tour. Also, messy experiments, genius guests, and something from outer space that you can actually hold. I can't wait to see you there. For a summer of science, we're exploring the universe. Find out where I'm playing near you at funkidslive.com/tour. It's time to search out some of the most weird, odd, unique, and devastating things in the world. For this week's Dangerous Dan, we're diving into the ocean to find a fish with one of the most painful stings around. The weaver fish is mostly found around the seas of Europe, so the Mediterranean, the East Atlantic, the North Sea. They're bobbing off the coast of the UK, France and Spain. They float in shallow waters, and they're fairly small, growing to about 15 centimetres. What's that? 6 inches from your little finger over to your thumb, probably that long. They're normally quite a beige colour with some black spots, and that's brilliant camouflage. It's what they do. They bury themselves in the sand with just their eyes sticking out, watching for anything nearby. They're covered in venomous spines, these spikes that jut from them all over their fin and gills. And because they hang out in shallow waters, they're often trodden on, and the spines will stick in the skin and cause so much pain. An intense burning fire runs through your body. It will become red and swollen. You can be dizzy, feel sick, have trouble breathing, and parts of your body can become paralysed. Some say it's the most painful ocean sting in European waters. And because it's quite a small fish, but so smart and so spiky, that means the weaver fish goes straight onto our Dangerous Dan list. For this week's Battle of the Sciences, where we are trying once and for all to learn about the greatest science ever, we're diving under the ocean, talking oceanography itself with Dr. Alessandro Silvano, who joins us. Alessandro, you have 1 minute to tell us why oceanography is the greatest science around, and that minute starts in 3, 2, 1, go!
So oceanography is the greatest science because 70% of the Earth is ocean. So if you want to know about the Earth, you need to know about the ocean. And it's the greatest stuff because in the ocean we can find everything matters for Earth, from life under the water to a major reservoir of heat and many other things that matter for the climate. And if things changes in the ocean, then there are big issues on land as well for all of us. So we are very interested in trying to see what happens in the ocean, what happens very deep in the ocean, so in the abyssal ocean where there is no light, but there is life. So something very different from what we are used to see in the real world. So as a scientist, we really want to know what's happening in the ocean and how it will change in the future.
There we go, Alessandro. Thank you for that. With a few seconds to spare as well. Now, I'm always hearing, Alessandro, that we know about 5% of what's actually under the ocean. A very small amount. The big question is, why don't we know more? I understand it's massive, but why haven't we found everything with the technology available to us?
So it's true, we know very little. We used to say that we know more about the surface of the moon or of Mars than about the seafloor, so the bottom of the ocean. The actual shape of the seafloor is still unknown. We know probably less than 30% of the seafloor shape. And the reason is that. One reason is that historically, because we didn't know much about, we didn't have the technology to do it, to go deep into the ocean, we couldn't map it, but now we have it. And so there are big international programs that aim to improve the mapping of the ocean over the next 20, 30 years. There is the goal of reaching 30% by 2030. And we hope that by mid-century, we will know more or less everything.
Now, if we know so little about what's happening under the sea and it's very hard to discover new things, in your role as a scientist, Alessandro, what types of things are you doing to find new things in the ocean, to learn more about what makes up such a big chunk of our Earth?
We try to use new technologies to do what was impossible to do before. So I would highlight two technologies. One is satellites. So we use satellites to see the surface of the ocean everywhere, every day, more or less. So we can see what happens at the surface of the ocean every day with satellites. And another thing we do is, for example, use satellites to track stuff also under the surface of the ocean, because the surface of the ocean has some sort of signal that is due to changes that happens beneath. So we can have a signature at the surface of the ocean that can be seen by satellites. So we use these satellites. They are very expensive, so hundreds of millions of pounds to run one satellite, but they give you a lot of information that otherwise we would not have. Another technology we use is robots. So we use underwater robots, sort of drones that can dive under the sea. And take measurements, take images, take everything you want. And now for example, in Southampton, where I work, there is a big lab, where there are these robots that can travel for hundreds of kilometers, up to 5,000 to 6,000 meters deep. So they can go everywhere in the ocean autonomously, and we can use them to observe what happens under the sea.
Earlier in the show, we answered Jessica's question with Dr. Emma Nicholls talking about dinosaurs with feathers, and we'll head back there now to the age of the dinosaurs. This is from our brilliant series. We're talking all about the Jurassic period. We're heading back millions of years, looking at what's in the sky, and we've arrived back in Jurassic times.
Imagine going back in time, not 100 years or 1,000 years, but millions of years. To the age of the dinosaur. Welcome to the Jurassic period, which existed between 145 and 200 million years ago. At the start of the Jurassic period, there was just one huge continent called Pangaea. And with no frozen ice caps, sea levels were much higher than they are today. And much of the Earth's surface was therefore underwater.
Uh-oh, something's moving.
We better watch our step. During the Jurassic period, Pangaea began to separate. The northern half, called Laurasia, started to break away, forming North America and Eurasia. What we otherwise call Europe and Asia, from the southern half, Gondwana, that included Antarctica, Madagascar, India, Australia, Africa and South America.
Wow, there's a whole new ocean.
Lagoons and massive lakes initially formed in the spaces created by the moving land masses. Eventually, these became the oceans that we know today. The Jurassic period was much hotter than we experience today, with hot and dry deserts in the middle of the land masses, huge sticky swamps along the coast, and vast forests full of giant ferns and tall leafy green conifers in between. And all sorts of dinosaurs were flourishing, like the knobbly armour-covered Skellidosaurus. Skellidosaurus was a dinosaur which lived in early Jurassic times. Like his close relations, the Stegosaurus and Ankylosaurus, he was a herbivore, meaning he only ate vegetation, not other animals. But with his beak like a mouth and bony horns, he would have been pretty scary.
Watch out for his tail. He's swinging it this way.
Phew, that was close. Obviously they aren't around today, but fossilised skeletons of Skellidosaurus found in England have been some of the most complete skeletons ever found, meaning that we know more about Skellidosaurus than many other dinosaurs.
Paleontology, pick.
Today, there are 7 continents on the Earth. Europe is one, the others are Asia, Africa, North America, South America, Antarctica and Australia. But how do we know that there used to be just one continent?
Paleontologists can tell this from fossils and animal life. By investigating land mammals on different continents, but which come from the same family, scientists can conclude that the only way they could travel such great distances is that they originally came from the same place. One example is the extinct freshwater reptile Mesosaurus. It was a bit like a lizard, and it has been found in Brazil and West Africa, 2 places that are now thousands of miles apart. The Mesosaurus would never have been capable of swimming such a vast distance.
And that is it for this week's Fun Kids Science Weekly. You can travel back in time with me and our Age of the Dinosaurs series. Search wherever you get your podcasts where you found this. You've got loads more brilliant shows that we make on Google, Apple, Spotify. They're on the free Fun Kids app and at funkidslive.com too. Get your tickets for our Summer of Science with Fun Kids Science Weekly live at funkidslive.com/tour. I'd love to see you there. Fun Kids are our children's radio station from the UK. You can listen all over the country on your app, on our website, and if you've got a smart speaker, wake it up and ask it to play Fun Kids.